Welcome to the only news show that doesn't have riot in the Capitol or something like that in its headline today. We are Security Weekly News for the week of 10 January 2021. Well, I do have politics on there, sorry. Section 230, Venomous Bear, SolarWinds continued, Busch, Chris Krebs, Alex Stamos, Parler, and Jason Wood.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
All right, welcome to the news. We'll stay away from politics mostly, I promise. So the SolarWinds supply chain attack has been linked now to Turla AP. Kaspersky revealed that they had found multiple similarities in Sunburst, which is the operational piece of that SolarWinds attack, and the Khazar, I don't know how to say that, so the Khazar backdoor malware. In addition to the coding that had a lot of similarities, Sunburst apparently has been repeatedly used with Turla tools, which is another collection of things that is used with Khazar. And the Turla group, which is also called Venomous Bear. I mean, if I could be called Venomous Bear versus Turla, I would be called Venomous Bear all the time because nothing is cooler than a Venomous Bear. I mean, I really like that idea a lot. But the Turla group, which is also called Venomous Bear, is a Russian language group that has been operating since 2014. But they actually said they may actually be a lot older than that, like all the way back into like 2004 and stuff like that they had been around, according to the Kaspersky article. The article goes on to describe the various algorithms which are similar to Khazar. There's a sleep algorithm, so like a snooze tool, the FNV1A hashing algorithm, and a UID, so drive identifier algorithm, all were the same algorithms that were used in Khazar. It's not clear who this may actually be. I mean, they were making a big case about it being Turla or Venomous Bear, and it's certainly, but it's possible that this was just basically the Starburst, somebody else that took this Starburst algorithm and poshed it up a bit with code so that it would look like that it was from Turla. I mean, because this has been done before. So sometimes people do that. They go out and add modules to things from other malware so that it will look like somebody else. I mean, that, it's both indicative and not indicative. So basically the answer is we don't know. But anyway, so it's kind of like you spraying a rival gang tag on the wall like Rick did in the Unity episode of Rick and Morty. I mean, if you keep up with such things. In a separate article, CrowdStrike, who has been asked to help SolarWinds. So SolarWinds is basically, circling the wagons at this point. So CrowdStrike has been brought in, and they're helping with the investigation. And they said that they had uncovered malware that was named Sunspot, which was actually used to inject the Sunburst backdoor into the Orion update. So the Orion update was what was actually being installed, and that's what had the malware in it. Basically, the update with the Sunburst add-on was delivered to as many as 18,000 SolarWinds customers last year. They said that only a few hundred of these customers were actually targeted later with a tool that's called Teardrop, which is the backdoor loader. So this is what's going to actually inject malware and stuff into the system. Sunspot basically focuses on one piece of this whole process, which is the msbuild.exe. So MS Build executable is a process that is used in the build compile process with Visual Studio. So if you have Microsoft Visual Studio and you sit down to compile a C program, MS Build is what is called to run that. Sometimes I think it's a linker if you use old world terminology, but so that component of it is where it assembles all the library components and all the other pieces into the finished product. So if Sunspot can detect the build process running, so it sees that thing actually running, it then looks at the build that's going on to see if the Orion solution file is involved. So there was a path that pulls the Orion solution into the build, and if it's involved, then it replaces the source code in the solution directory, which is what allows the injection of Sunburst. So they just swap a directory out in that build process, and this is why the hashes match, because once it builds, then it compiles, and you end up with the executable, and that executable, of course, is going to have a hash. But if the malware is already in the build before it even gets to the compile, then it's going to be part of the hash, and of course it matches. CrowdStrike did provide a full report on Sunspot on their blog, so you can check that out if you're interested in reading all the grim details about how that works. And finally, on the SolarWinds thing, SolarWinds now has apparently hired Chris Krebs and Alex Stamos, who is the former CISA director and the former Facebook CISO, who are going to help steer them through the crisis, in addition, I guess, to CrowdStrike. Krebs and Stamos formed a consulting company after Krebs was fired by U.S. President Donald Trump last month. The company is called the Krebs-Stamos Group, which sounds like a band in 1970 that made that song that you don't know the name of, but everybody knows and they think it might be Toto. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, I did include a story about the attack on the U.S. Capitol building. We won't talk about what happened, but and it's not because the Capitol attack was the headline on every single news outlet all week, but because I was really interested in this article because I thought it was about the security issue in this, and it was a security issue I've been talking about a lot for a long time, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate it, and I thought this made a good point. I've always told students, look, if you're physically compromised, you're screwed. I mean, if they're in the building, if they're in the server room, you're screwed. If somebody can take the server out of the rack and run out of the building with it, you're screwed. If you've got a console cable plugged into a Cisco firewall, you're screwed. So that's why CISSP covers physical security. If the enemy can get into your perimeter, you're screwed. I mean, that's the bottom line. And that's essentially what happened at the Capitol. And again, I don't want to talk about the Yahoos and so forth. I mean, a bunch of Yahoos got in the building. Okay, fine. But I think the non-political point about this is what happens when you get a physical breach of your offices. So I'm not talking about, I'm talking about a bunch of people running around loose, not even necessarily for the purpose of breaching your infrastructure. But when we used to do these kind of audits, we videoed everything. So we carried video cameras, and because there was tons of OSINT all over the place. I mean, whether it was on a Post-it note, it was a serial number, it was something that was written and hung on the wall, placards, and even just, configs that are laying on desks and things like that. So the Capitol breach wasn't really about OSINT. I don't think you would have to assume that it was. I mean, unless it was to cover up some other kind of thing, which it doesn't sound like. But I mean, how many of those legislators had their PIN numbers, password, credit card numbers, or whatever written on Post-it notes or something like that on their desks? So I don't really know what the rules are for politicians in the Capitol building or who exactly regulates what they can and can't do from a tech perspective, but I'm guessing that there was a lot of OSINT in that building. I mean, if you just look at all the meta OSINT that the breacher people provided on social media by videoing themselves running around, there's OSINT in those videos. I mean, whether it's just maps of the building or it's just stuff in the background or whatever, and not to mention, of course, them, videoing themselves and posting it somewhere. But the point is, it might not be a bad time in light of this. I mean, to review your physical policies and how do you recover from a significant and undefined breach. I mean that's the what if a bunch of protesters break in your offices tomorrow? Are there passwords stuck on Post-it notes? Are there all sorts of OSINT stuff out there? So you might want to dust those old OSINT policies off and do an audit, maybe. Maybe. I think so. And I don't want to turn this into any kind of political commentary. I really don't. But there were some developments this week following historic riots in the United States, which led to a takeover of the U.S. Capitol on the 6th. Now, I don't care what side you're on, and I don't care who you like and dislike. But a lot of people didn't like to see the symbol of the U.S. government get trampled on by yahoos. And as such, a lot of fallout occurred in tech and the social media world as a result. For instance, U.S. President Donald Trump had his Twitter and Facebook accounts suspended permanently. I don't know what that means. I mean, they can probably unsuspend them permanently too. Parler, Parler then, which is a right-wing social media alternative for, when Facebook isn't racist enough or something, turn to Parler. But I digress. Parler was removed from Amazon's servers. So they actually took the servers offline, and then Apple and Google immediately after that removed, I don't know the order, maybe they did this first and then the servers, but all three of those big entities that basically mean the end of your life as a piece of software, Apple and Google took them off of their stores, which means that if you still have it, you have it, but then Amazon shut the servers down. So that may represent the end of the 2-year-old right-wing fun zone, Parler. But the point is that this article details how then @DonkNB, @Donk_NB, that Twitter handle, realized that maybe this was going to happen and began scraping Parler on the 6th. And so according to @Donk_NB, about 99% of the public posts from Parler will be available in the archive that person is producing, which will include raw video files and GPS coordinates. @DonkNB, I'm going to quit saying underscore, @Donk_NB continued to state that no private posts were in the archive despite there being a whole bunch of rumors that were being circulated. And Chris Vickery from UpGuard said that Parler wasn't exactly a bastion of security as such, and that metadata that normally is controlled better, like GPS information and raw video feeds and so forth, are normally not scrapable, but on Parler they apparently were, and so they included all that metadata in the public post, and as such, who knows what's out there. So maybe not posting videos of yourself committing federal crimes should be a warning notice on social media now? I don't know. In continuing, Parler is suing Amazon then for disabling their servers in the cloud. So far, the fallout from the riots has basically been the banning of Parler. Mr. Trump and many of his close allies from Twitter have been banned from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, Reddit, and Twitch. Even Twitch. I don't know exactly what will keep them from creating new accounts like John Barron, which was Mr. Trump's porn name or something like that he used to use back in the 80s. He has this name. But this may well lead to a lot of talk about censorship, and the companies I guess the statement is that the companies have user policies that say that inciting violence is a big no-no, and for the most part they are private companies, so the First Amendment doesn't directly apply. So basically, if you're posting things inciting insurrection and whatever, I know if I go on Twitter right now and I start tweeting things about let's all get together and do something terrible, they will probably block my account, and if I keep doing it, I guess they would ban me. It's probably going to be cases for the Supreme Court sometime out in the future, would be my guess. Following that, Twitter purged more than 70,000 accounts, which were primarily affiliated with the conspiracy site QAnon, with a specific focus on accounts which had incited violence, planned attacks, and shared deliberately misleading election information. The United States House of Representatives then has indicated that it plans to look into the role social media played in the Capitol riot. So you've done it now. Now you got the Congress looking at it from one side, the White House looking at it from another side. I think this likely leads back into this whole Section 230 debate. So Section 230 is a part of the U.S. federal law that reputedly created the internet. It's sometimes called 26 words that created the internet. Specifically, what it says is it created social media, but the section itself says no provider or user of any interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or the speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So this is legalese for the publisher can't be held liable for what you post on a social media website. U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly tried to get this repealed, this particular section, because one of his basic approaches to business and everything else is to sue everyone and let God sort them out later. And he has been frustrated by the fact that he can't sue Twitter directly over things that people say on Twitter about him. And pretty much, every service except something like Gab, I guess, but he can't sue them either. But the thing was part of what is called the Communications Decency Act, which already sounds horrible. And most of the elements of that legislation were shot down by the Supreme Court. But Section 230 was not. So now everyone's looking at the liability of social media on both sides. Whew, that was a long section. I think you get college credit for that, maybe. I'm not sure. But nevertheless, when we return, Jason Wood joins us, so stick around.
Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires Discovery in Depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in Depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/Big ID. Increased attacks, skill gaps, talent shortages, expanding attack surfaces. Cybersecurity and IT teams face these real issues every day. CyberA for Teams is the #1 NIST-aligned DoD 8140 and 8570 compliance certification and skills training platform. CyberA for Teams makes managing teams easier, guarantees measurable training outcomes, and keeps your team's skills sharp to meet today's biggest security threats. And did you know 96% of the Fortune 500 have employees training on CyberA? CyberA for Teams. Now you know. Visit cybera.it/solved to solve your team training challenges.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gare and gimble in the wab is the only way to describe the feeling you get with Jason Wood on your show. Hi, Jason.
Hi. I don't even know what you said.
It's a poem. It's a poem.
I figured, but
it's a poem called Jabberwocky. It was
I remember that.
by C.S. Lewis that wrote Alice in Wonderland when he was smoking opium or something.
Yeah, I remember.
Or smoking something. Well, welcome aboard anyway.
Yeah, good to be here. So it seems like I usually like to pick on the United States government for issues around privacy, most because that's what hits the news here. But today I decided maybe Britain needed a little attention and story time. And to be honest with you, Doug has spent a lot of time talking about the United States today already, so we'll just let that one go.
I'll be the one getting deported.
There you go. Yesterday, the Register, one of the more entertaining British news outlets out there, published an article titled, "Thou shalt not hack indiscriminately. High Court of England tells Britain's spy agencies." Now, with a headline like that, you just can't help but dig into it. And just as a note, Doug and I were talking about this before. We really like whoever comes up with the headlines at the Register. They're awesome. Regardless of all of that, what is this article about? Basically, Britain's High Court revoked the ability of the country's intelligence agencies to perform wide-sweeping intrusions under what are called general warrants, in quotes. And the Register went a little bit sensational, as they are, known to do, when they said this removes the government's ability to, and I quote, hack millions of people at a time, end quote. Now, did the British government really hack millions of people in one go? Probably not, because that would really interfere with what they were actually after as they sorted through all of that noise. But what they're pointing out here is that these general warrants gave a very broad interpretation, or a broad authorization, rather, of who they could actually go for. And it granted a lot of leeway to the British government to conduct surveillance operations against potentially British citizens or subjects. Was it citizens or subjects? Subjects, I guess.
Subjects.
Yeah. So prior to the ruling, organizations like MI5, MI6, GCHQ could request and receive a single broadly scoped warrant that authorized them to conduct computer intrusions against people or organizations of interest. And, honestly, I don't read a whole lot of nefariousness into this. It's probably mostly laziness because it makes it easier for the organizations to just say, well, as we find people in this operation, we could just add them to the scope, to our target list because we were granted authorization to go after kind of what they're calling a class of targets. I'm not sure how that works out. But, I can kind of understand some of the reason behind that. You got to fill out every time. If you were going in and re-adding people and being very fine-grained about this, you got to write up the legal paperwork, take it down to it's for authorization to get the warrant granted, and then to come back and go after, whoever it is you're after. And, most of us like those kinds of shortcuts, none of us like filling out lots of paperwork and the whole bit, but this isn't just a case of us avoiding filling out our TPS reports. This is instead the government going after people, breaking into their equipment, and trying to gather information up about them. According to Ben Jaffe, the barrister, which is apparently a lawyer authorized to argue in front of high courts, the barrister for Privacy International, which is based in London, and pursue this case. The issue with the previous rulings about the law that granted that these authorizations were granted under is it did not appropriately consider what targets were being specified in these general warrants. Previously, the warrants could describe a class of targets and then grant authorizations based on this description. So, I don't know, however they want to group that or describe that, they could give some kind of description of the type of people or the type of equipment and people or locate, I don't know, kind of general here, right? And then go after whatever they find in this area. Instead, Mr. Jaffe said that the law used to grant these warrants instead required that targets be specified, in quotes there. This requires the agencies to, instead of describing a broad description of creating a broad description of who they're after, list out who it is that they're after. Who are the targets. So you look at this and you're okay. That sounds good, right? We're gonna make sure that the government's doing due diligence. They're not picking up people that they shouldn't, and surveillance and stuff like that, and are required to do paperwork before they break into somebody's system, get specific authorization. But does this ruling mean that the British government can no longer hack into the equipment of surveillance targets? And the answer is no, it doesn't. At least not as far as I read. Instead, the decision is basically just requiring extra work on the part of the intelligence agencies, requiring them to be more specific in their requests. And I would imagine that as they're doing their operation, they find somebody new, they have to go get a new warrant at this point or amend their warrant maybe. I don't know if that's possible, to collect information and add these new targets to it. It does appear that this would lower the chance of somebody being accidentally picked up into the one of these operations when they weren't really meant to be. But at least because somebody would have to look at them and decide whether or not we want to include them or not. But obviously, we could kind of game this a little bit as well, because all the agencies have to do is somebody's name pops up, and we just add them to the list, and then we send off today's batch or this week's batch of requests for a warrant. And we don't look at these folks individually very closely. We'll do that later after we get authorization. We just have to name them. And they get approved rather quickly, and the operation continues on as planned. Now, the British government has what is called the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, which is responsible for approving these warrants, and that would be very similar to the Foreign Intelligence Services Court. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court here in the United States that grants the United States agencies authorization to do this sort of thing. They both apparently have the same kind of reputation of very quickly granting these types of requests for these warrants. So how much does this really raise the bar? I don't know. I like the idea or the principle of the idea that the government has to do their due diligence before they go after somebody and break into their stuff and start, getting really, surveilling somebody, raises the bar a little bit higher. In practical terms, how much of a difference does it really make? It requires some more work maybe on the government's part, but it could still be shortcutted. You just don't vet the people you're adding to it. They popped up, so we include them in the list. The only thing that seems to be maybe the practical difference is going to be we're going to use a few more reams of paper as we submit these warrants to the IPT. So we'll see how it goes. This is kind of a constant tug of war. It's been happening here in the United States for years. I haven't paid as much attention to Britain because I'm not. I don't live in Britain, but it sounds very similar to what's going on. What we have here in the U.S. is going on over there, this tug of war between the privacy groups and the intelligence organizations. So go ahead and hit the show notes, take a read at it, follow the links. There's a lot there to read, more than what I just brought up.
I do want to say that I think where you actually live is probably the exact opposite of England. Like, if anything could be like a just complete mirror image of England, it's like where you live. I won't say where it is, but just between us.
Just between us on the air.
Yeah, but I didn't say it, so could be anywhere. Could be New South Wales, but who knows? Anyway, all right. And finally then, the recent COVID-19 legislation that was passed apparently contained a little add-on, which is pretty much typical. But this one was a little strange to me. Basically, it was an add-on to the COVID-19 relief bill that asked the Pentagon to release a full report on all they know about what they call unidentified aerial phenomena. So we call that UFOs usually, but the Pentagon has to have their own thing. So this is supposed to happen within 6 months. They're supposed to release everything they have on UFOs, and how would you know? I mean, if there's a warehouse somewhere that's got the Ark of the Covenant in it, and they don't release the Ark of the Covenant, but they release everything else, how would you know what was in the warehouse or what? But I know that's another whole matter. But in the meantime, a site called the Black Vault published what they claim is the entire CIA collection. So these agencies really spent a lot of time on this collection of documents on the matter of UFOs. So if you're still afraid that Carl Gebhardt Busch is coming after you, you might want to leave it alone. But otherwise, sounds like a good time of moving dots, blurry video, and pilots saying in a West Virginia accent, I don't know what that was, but it blowed up real good, over. And that's the news. In the continuing time of plague, there is a vaccine. Please take it if it's offered to you. And, come on. I'm Doug White. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.